Thank you for joining us this morning for Micro Moves Major Impact, how small website tweaks can drive big results for manufacturers. I'm your host, Jim Brophy, Group Director of Digital here at Northwoods. In today's often bigger is better world, it's easy for manufacturing marketers to get caught up in large digital projects. And sometimes those massive undertakings, like launching a direct-to-consumer strategy, integrating an ERP system, or redoing your entire website, absolutely necessary. But small incremental changes can also make a huge difference in driving quality traffic to your site and creating an amazing user experience and improve conversion opportunities. So today, we will discuss how some of our manufacturing clients achieved impressive results with just a few small tweaks to their websites and share why these micro enhancements are oftentimes easier to get approved internally, even on a tight budget. Our trail guides this morning are UX research lead Caitlin Gerke and our digital marketing practice lead Ed Kozlowski. Ed has more than 13 years experience in SEO, PPC, and email marketing for both B2B and B2C organizations. He's certified in Google Ads, measurement marketing, and Google Tag Manager, and uses analytics and research to develop exceptional digital marketing strategies. Caitlin is a skilled UX strategist and leads the Northwoods UX research and strategy teams, and she genuinely enjoys helping clients and professionals better understand the value of a data-backed marketing approach. Ed and Caitlin enjoy helping each client determine where they sit in the digital landscape and finding ways to improve. So we're in very good hands this morning. If you have any questions during the presentation, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions at any time, and we will answer as many as we can during our Q&A session immediately following the presentation. Also, please feel free to chat to connect with our team and other attendees, or share real-time feedback with Caitlin using the reactions button in the bottom toolbar. Additionally, we'll also be sending out a recording of today's webinar in the next few days, so you'll be able to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. So with that, let's jump into our class, and I'll turn things over to Ed and Caitlin.
Thank you, Jim. So today's journey, we'll talk about getting more visitors to your site, which will have an SEO and GEO focus. And we'll talk a little bit about what GEO is later on as well. And then deliver an exceptional on-site site experience, which will be driven by Caitlin. And then we'll have time for a Q&A after. So getting more visitors to your site, SEO and content enhancements are SEO and content micro enhancements. So making micro adjustments or micro enhancements from an SEO perspective, what is that? That's when we're fine tuning a site and making adjustments just to help improve your search rankings, right? We want to change things. It's maybe not a overhaul of your entire site, but it's stuff you can do quickly, maybe while you have some spare time to go in and kind of make some adjustments. And this can also have a big impact on GEO, which is kind of a very new trend that's kind of picking up some steam, which we'll talk about things we can do for that as well. The impact for this, oftentimes with micro adjustments, you're not looking at something that's going to increase your keyword, like number of keywords you rank for, but maybe increase the ranking you have. So moving from like 3 to 2 or 3 to 1 within Google. And it might also increase rankings, but I'm not talking about things that are going to increase like 100 or 500 keywords. You might just increase a few, right? So it's kind of really getting targeted on what you're doing. And other impact it might have is getting the SERP feature, right? That's where if you're on Google and you get the AI overview, you get the people also ask, the image pack, various things like that, that you might get an increase in your rankings for. That's actually not the number one here. It's actually the 0 rank. You're ranking above it. That might be the impact you see from some of these as well. And just some tips to keep it micro, because I know when I work, it's very easy to start, oh, I can do this on every single web page on the website, or, I want these huge changes, but sometimes I need to step back and make sure I'm focusing on things. So one of the things I use is I pick one thing I want to do in terms of SEO for a week, and I'll go through clients, and during my downtime, let's say I have a big project I'm working on, I need a little time off from that. I might go do these types of enhancements on a different client or that specific client and kind of work through my client list that way. And I try to prioritize my approach with it. So I can choose different angles to go. Target the top 10 keywords. If you know, hey, these are the most important keywords I want to target, I'll go after them, right? And maybe focus on the pages that we want to rank for that. Or maybe I'll look at the top 10 pages in terms of organic sessions and I'll focus on them. Or top 10 pages that aren't ranking well that we believe should, or 10 high value money pages. You know, I worked in e-commerce for a long time. We knew pages that if we got people to land on them, we made a lot of money. So we'd focus a lot of time on just enhancing those specific pages. And it can be a different number than 10. It's just make sure you make it digestible for yourself. So you go make the changes and doesn't become too much to bite off. And one thing I'll put in there is if you don't know what people search, don't make the updates, right? You need to do the keywords research. Sometimes, which I'll talk about, you can utilize your prior knowledge of keywords people search and kind of implement that to make it quicker. But if you don't know, you need to first know that. So that's like, don't go ahead and just make changes unless you know what you're doing first. So one of the first ones that I think can have a really big impact, and this is one that can help you jump from that number 2 spot to maybe that number 1 spot in rankings, is get your main keyword within the first 100 words on a web page, right? This is part of that on-page optimization. I think it gets underutilized sometimes in this day and age. Here we have digital advertising services. We have it in the H1, that's great. And then we have it a second time within the content. That's about the 47th word where it comes up within the content. If I went to this page and this is the keyword I want to rank for this page, I might need to make adjustments to move it higher. In this case, I did not. In your case, you may, right? So this is where you can go and say, hey, I know some high money value keywords. I'm going to make adjustments on pages that should rank for that keyword and maybe bump it up in that content where you don't need to overhaul your content. Maybe you just need to pull a sentence up or rewrite a sentence or two to get that high value keyword higher on the page. Another good one that I think can be really impactful is internal links. So interlinking your content with keyword rich anchor text. So make sure your text is a keyword you want the next page to rank for. So in this example here, we see user research services actually is linking out to our services /websites /UX and website strategy page. That's a great keyword for the page it's linking to rank for. Now, I might look at this though and might know that, hey, we actually want to rank for UX and website strategy based on the URL because that's a targeted keyword there. Maybe I want to change this sentence and then the anchor text there so that I can put in UX and website strategy. And this is something you can do on all your websites or all your web pages. Make sure your money pages are having keywords linking over to them. And each page on your site should have 3 to 5 interlinks, so linking to yourself. You can go above that at times, but don't do something where you're putting 10, 12, 20. It's okay here and there, but don't stuff it. Kind of like keyword stuffing. You don't want to keyword stuff and overuse keywords. Same thing with interlinking. You want to use the proper amount. Longer content can probably have more than shorter content. Another one that I think is not utilized enough is linking out to high quality sources or third-party sources that are relevant to your content. Here we wrote a blog post about, you know, when there's downturn in the economy, why you should invest in your marketing. And we linked out to a study showing why that can have a high impact for you in the long run as a company. So linking out to those sources is going to give you kind of a value, and Google is going to see it as you linking out to a quality source versus poor sources. The way I think about it is back in the day when people were backlinking a lot, if you backlinked and did a lot of linking and we're trying to get links and linking out to poor quality sources at times, right? People would build sites to just link out to things. That's going to hurt you. But if you're linking out to high quality information, Google sees that as, oh, they're linking out to high quality stuff. That's a good signal for both you and the site you're linking for, actually. So it's a great tactic to help yourself kind of boost your rankings just a little bit as well. Another tactic that I'll use from time to time is, you know, we all the time want to overhaul a ton of content, but sometimes you can just go through and add a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, whatever it is. If you look up here on the top example, we have about 6 keywords in the before. And then in the after we added about 2 paragraphs to it, we added 3 additional keywords, right? So just by increasing the amount of content, we can add to what we're targeting. This is where you can expand your keywords. You're maybe not pushing yourself up as much here, but if you look at like some of your high value pages that have a lot of authority online, let's say this page already ranks well organically, adding more to it, as long as it's relative, strong quality content, it can help you rank for more keywords, right? So just building out your reach a little bit. And this is something you can do, and I say this cautiously, but if you have the industry knowledge and you have the keyword knowledge to pair with that, you can sometimes, instead of going through and doing all the keyword research to keep it very micro, you can just add that content to the site, knowing that, hey, if I add this, I know what people are searching. Topic, generative engine optimization. I could very easily anticipate the keywords that were going to come with that. I have a lot of experience with digital marketing. I have a lot of experience with the keywords that come with digital marketing and the keyword research I've done in the past for that. So I can anticipate what people are going to search. Generative engine optimization, GEO, generative engine optimization. What is generative engine optimization? All of those I was very easily able to anticipate. And I'll give you another example. In a past life at a previous company, when COVID hit, it shifted how our product was used by consumers, but I had all this knowledge of how people search for our product. And we tried to perform keyword research on what the new use would be, but because it was so new, there was no keyword data yet. So we had to anticipate and create content based off our historical knowledge. We created a couple pages that made us a lot of money because we anticipated what people were going to search, and they eventually did. We also made some that didn't do well as well, but we were able to set ourselves up for future success based on our kind of knowledge base of both, again, the company, the product, industry knowledge, and our keyword knowledge. But you need to circle back and do the keyword research later on this type of thing. So here we have AEO, which is answer engine optimization. If you look at the keywords here, if I didn't do my keyword research, I never would have anticipated that this was even a thing, right? So by doing further keyword research, I was able to go in and maybe add these keywords to the page we created before on GEO or generative engine optimization. The other thing is we might say, okay, we found these and now we need a second page for these, right? So you still need to go do the keyword now or keyword research. Make sure you're finding that content or what people are searching to kind of circle back and bring it back and increase what you already did. So think short term, right? If you can add some content or create some content when you have a little extra time, sometimes it's okay to circle back and go and pull in the keyword research later. But again, you need the knowledge of both. I caution against just writing content without knowing or having a good idea what people are searching. And then incorporating GEO, just for people who may not know, because this is somewhat new, generative engine optimization is the process of optimizing to rank for AI search results or AI tools. So search result, if you think Google, we can see here in the screenshot below in the example, we see the AI overview. People are asking questions on Google. There's an AI overview answering things. That would be part of GEO. That's also part of SEO as well. But then the other side of that is the tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, a bunch of them now. But those tools, right, we need to optimize to rank for them. And that's what generative engine optimization is. It's also known as answer engine optimization, or some people know it a little differently. I think, given it's so new, and a year from now, we might have a different name than these, or one of them might become kind of what we call it. So just keep that in mind as you go forward when you think about this. And keep this in mind that as people search, right, as they do these searches, these informational searches on something like ChatGPT, more and more links are now pushing back to websites. So here I did a GEO search on here. I asked it a few questions. You could see it did geo-targeting. It actually didn't pull up generative engine optimization until I prompted it later, but it brought up different links. So we have things to Moz, which is a local, or is not local, it's an SEO or digital marketing website. You can get a lot of good content, but it also did things like NASA because it brought up some terms relative to that as we were figuring things out. So your content now, as you rank on Google, which is the step one for GEO, then can go into these tools like ChatGPT and it can drive you real traffic. And just to show you an example, in April here, we're seeing a huge increase on some of our clients. I think the overall trend is we're seeing this from October through now, a nice increase in sessions coming from AI specific traffic. But look at this specific example. We had a huge increase in April. Part of that's due to efforts that we've done. Part of that is just due to more and more people are starting to utilize these tools and kind of search with them in GEO and SEO. And how we're looking at it is digital marketing engine optimization, right? Because they kind of fall in line with each other. I'm not going to go into super detail on GEO right now because we're focus more on micro things, but just think of it, a lot of what you do with SEO can have an impact on the GEO side and kind of vice versa. So they kind of work together in the same realm, and we want to optimize for them. So some SEO and geo focused on page updates that you can do, or optimizations, add questions with answers to the pages that don't have questions. So oftentimes these are done on blogs, and that's great, and continue to do that. But think about your category pages now. You might want to go put an FAQ on your category pages or your product pages if you don't already have one. Having that content on there that asks the questions that people might be going out into these tools and asking is going to help you rank within those tools, right? So you can go in, pick a couple pages that are very important to you, get some questions on there with the answers, and then maybe at a later date, you go and kind of add it site wide. Another one is, as you're writing this new content, mimic how people are going to talk, especially with step-by-step things that we're starting to see pop up. If there's like, hey, how to change the oil on a car, right? There might be a conversational piece you can incorporate with your content. And that is an example of something we have seen. Those types of pages that have that step-by-step conversational aspect are driving some of that AI content or AI traffic to your site. Another one that can be very helpful, especially if you have content that's already out there, is go back and incorporate some statistical data and then cite sources with external links. So we kind of talked about that external linking and kind of that being a change you could make or an update you could make to a third-party site. This is a good thing also for GEO, right? Going out and incorporating that, finding good sources, that's things that GEO is going to like, so they can, or those tools can give a much stronger answer when people are utilizing them. And one important thing I think to point out is a lot of manufacturers are, often marketing to engineers who will be using AI as they go through these step-by-step processes with the various things. So that becomes part of your marketing, but it's not just engineers. We're starting to see it come up in e-commerce as well. People asking questions about the products, and product pages sometimes are even pushing content in there or pushing it into these AI tools. But more times than not, it's more kind of that higher funnel stuff where people are asking informational questions is where we're seeing that shift. Another great thing is if you have content on a page, and this can help out with both SEO and GEO, is just rewrite it with bullets in lists. So step-by-step things, right? Put a 1, 2, 3, 4. Other things might be more suited for a bullet like you see below, but those can be really good. And even if you go into like an AI tool and you ask it questions, it spits out a bulleted list oftentimes or a numbered list. And that's why you want it in your content, right? Because it's pulling from content online and then putting it into the searches or the queries that people are doing, right? So you want to get in there, give it digestible. Again, this is also good for SEO. People like to read this way. It's very easy for them to look at the page in this scenario here, in this example on the screen, and find out what they want and find areas. Maybe they can just scan the bullets and the bolded keywords or the bolded words on there, and then they can pick one out and read the whole thing, right? Because then they can be very targeted with their going. So just a kind of review there on SEO and GEO. Prioritize keywords and or pages of high impact changes. Utilize your downtime. Make sure it's not things that are like overwhelming to you, things you can make quick updates to, and utilize your knowledge when appropriate, right? You need to make sure you know the keywords, but if you have good industry knowledge and keyword knowledge, you can make some quick changes without having to do a whole research phase and then circle back to it. If the changes seem major, maybe step back for micro targeting, right? That's something maybe to do when you have the time to set aside for that project. And then I'll pass this on to Caitlin.
Right. Thanks so much, Ed. All right, there we go. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how to do the same thing on a website side. So Ed shared a lot of great ideas of how you can make those kind of micro changes on the SEO side. Let's talk about your website as a whole. Now, when we talk about making those types of changes to your website, I want to actually use the analogy of your website being a house. We've used this analogy on a couple other times. You might have heard this on some of our other webinars or podcasts, but I think it's a really helpful way to understand what a macro change is on a website and what a micro change is on the website. If you think of your website as a house that you are managing and you are doing things with. Now, when we think about something macro change, what I think about is a website redesign. That is a full blown, let's take it all down, let's build something new. In terms of a website, that would be, or sorry, in terms of a house, that would be something like we're moving away or we're building on a whole new chunk of the house or something like that. We're making these big, massive changes that dramatically alter what that house actually is. when you want to do a redesign, when you want to make those big macro changes, you want to look at kind of what's happening with your business right now. So if things like you've made an incredibly major change to what your product offerings are, you're offering completely different things, or you've done something major and done a total overhaul in terms of what products or services you're providing, well, it might be time to do a redesign because it's likely going to have a pretty big impact on your website. Another thing that might signal that you need a larger redesign is any kind of major changes with navigation. If your entire website structure and the way it's organized isn't working, that's a pretty big change that we might want to take a step back and say, hey, let's see if there's anything we can do on a bigger scale to make larger improvements to the website. The other big thing to keep in mind, many things, but kind of the big things that we see in terms of macro changes would be something like your technology or design is incredibly out of date. If your website looks like it was built in the 90s, or if your website loads so slowly that it's hard to open anything, or the technology behind the scenes is so out of date that it's dramatically impacting your user experience and your own experience, well, then you might need a larger redesign. But that's not always the case. When you have a problem with the house that you're living in, you don't always just move away. Sometimes you just need a coat of paint, or you need to redecorate a room, or add a window. And that's where these micro changes come in. And oftentimes, a lot of the issues that people are facing with their websites can be handled with a smaller change, like a coat of paint. So things that might signal that you need some of these more micro changes on your site would be, say you brought on a new service line or you changed a product line. The overall company is the same, but you made some small alterations to what you're offering. Maybe let's look at how we can make some micro changes. Maybe you suspect that a couple pages aren't working the way you want them to. You're not getting conversions the way you want to, or the navigation of a particular section of the site maybe isn't right. That might be a smaller change we can make. Maybe you want to update colors or imagery. The overall design is fine, but maybe you made a minor change to your branding or things like that. Maybe there's something we can do on a more micro scale that can help there as well. Or if you've got some smaller technology or functionality changes you need to make. Again, if the site is working as a whole, but maybe there's some small things that we can make tweaks to make it work better, that might be a time when a micro change, a coat of paint, a new redesign of a room could help us to get there as well. So the nice thing, though, about whether you're making a macro change or a micro change is that it all begins the same. And Jim kind of hinted at this when he talked about my intro and my interest, and that's data. We, follow the philosophy that we can get data and we can make changes to your website based on data. And that if you're taking the time to make those changes based on data, you're making sure that you're making the changes based on things that are actually going to be worthwhile for you in the end. And how we get that data is through lots of different tools and ways of gathering information. A handful of these I will comment on in the next two stories that I'm going to share. So I'm going to share two different examples of clients that we've worked with to make some micro UX changes to their and what data we gathered at a high level at least, and how we made those changes. This first example is going to be a client that was looking to add CAD drawings to their website, a manufacturer that was looking to add CAD drawings to help improve people under more resources about their products they were offering. This client was a manufacturer of conveyor belt accessories. And again, they wanted to add those CAD drawings to some of the products on the site. So our task was, let's figure out how to add these. Where do we put these into the site? They weren't making major changes to the content of their site. They just wanted to figure out where was the best place to insert this type of content or insert this link that would be the best experience for the users at the end of the day of their website. So we looked at, for the example that I'm going to share here, two different types of product pages and did some analysis, trying to understand what are the users' goals when they go to these pages, and how could these CAD drawings that they're trying to incorporate relate to those goals when they get to those pages. Now, a major part of this was heat maps, which shows some examples of how that was incorporated in just a second. But my question for you, just to get a little idea of how you all are using this right now, is are you currently running heat maps on your site? Heat maps are those kind of images that show kind of hot and cold zones of where people are clicking, how far down the page they're scrolling. And it can be a really useful tool in terms of UX. So I'm just curious, for those of you who are in our audience today, yes, are you running them? No, are you not? Or are you unsure? Maybe you're running something and you're not sure if it's exactly heat maps or something adjacent. So please fill out the poll as you are able to. And in just a second, we'll close it. We'll get the results. And we got the results. Okay, cool. Wow. Okay, so 55% of you are running heat maps. Awesome. I'll show you a cool example in a second of how we use them in this case. 36% said no. Well, you're going to learn about them today. Maybe that'll interest you. And then 9% unsure. Okay, awesome. So great. Good to hear that a lot of you are already using heat maps. We talk about them a lot and they're really helpful. But let's show here how helpful they can be and how we use them in this example. So for both of these pages that we are analyzing, these types of product pages, we ran heat maps. And this is the first page that we're going to look at. This is the first product page that someone gets to on the site when they're trying to kind of filter their way down the products. So it's the first level, their first introduction, the kind of high level overview of that type of product that they're looking at. So we ran those heat maps. And in this case, this is a heat map showing clicks on the page. So this heat map is tracking where people are clicking on the page. And anywhere that is red hot means that someone is clicking a lot on that section of the page. Anywhere that's gray or even a little bit blue means that there's no clicks to very few clicks, and then kind of range of colors in between. And we looked at multiple pages that had this exact same template to see what were the consistencies in how someone was interacting with this page. The goal of people on this page, based on our analysis of heat maps, as well as Google Analytics and some of the other research that we did, was that they were just trying to get to the next level in this process. This page was an introduction to this line of products, and this bottom section of the page down here was basically links to additional product families within that collection. So most of the time we saw a lot of clicks, as you can even see on this heat map on the side here, either on the filter or on the products links themselves. Most of the clicks were, let's get them to a future product page. So really that was the goal we determined. People are coming to this page to get to a deeper product page in this process. We also could see that this kind of orange button up here was linking to a resource, a product calculator that was related to this product. And while there were some clicks on that resource, there weren't a lot. People weren't really in that mindset yet to look at a resource. They just wanted to get more product information. So if you're looking at this is the high level analysis of it. We got plenty of other data that pointed this way as well. But a lot of these things we're pointing to, I don't think people are actually that interested in these CAD drawings yet when they're at this stage. They're still filtering down to products they want to look at further. They haven't quite narrowed down the products they're looking at yet. So we wanted to include the link to them on this page, but we wanted to not inhibit them from getting to those deeper product pages that they were looking for. So what we did is we added a small stripe. So the recommendation was to add a small stripe just above the listing of products on the page that linked to the entire CAD library. So someone could go to that page, filter through all of the available CAD drawings, see what was available to them. This way, the stripe would increase awareness that these resources were available. People could go on and see the resources available. They could go and learn more about these CAD drawings since they were a new offering. But they weren't intrusive. They wouldn't inhibit someone from getting to a deeper product page if that's all they were coming to this page to do. So it was a way of letting them know, hey, this is available, but if right now you're just trying to get to a product page, we're not going to stand in your way. We're going to let you scroll past and keep doing what you're doing without causing too much of an issue for you. We then went one step deeper. So when they got to that high level first page, they clicked on the link to the product page, they ended up on this page. And this page was a very different structure. It was a second level deep of these products. And it had a lot of different purposes. We learned from the heat maps and learned from some of the other research we were doing, and just looking at the content on this page, that it did a lot of work to provide resources related to that collection of products. It linked to a deeper level of products, some more specific components within that family. And as well as it provided general product information about that collection of products, some general information about that line to make sure people knew that they were in the right area of products that they were looking for. It was also a very long page. This is actually, the side here is actually cut off on both the top and the bottom. It keeps going. Some of them were even longer. So we knew that there was already a lot we were serving people on this page, and we wanted to be really wary of that as we were looking at adding more content to this page. So again, we ran some analysis. We did heat maps, again, being a big piece of this, as well as some Google Analytics and some other data that we gathered. And we could see a few different things. One, we could see that there was engagement with these tabs across the top that were showing kind of features of the product, specifications of the products, things like that. We could see that they were clicked on universally on basically all the pages we looked at. People were engaging with these tabs. They were clicking through to see the information. We could also see quite a lot of engagement with the actual resources themselves, the PDFs, instruction manuals, and videos, and things like that that were being provided on this page as well. Another thing we saw with these very long pages is that users would often leave somewhere in the middle of these resources. Typically, by the time they got to the resources, they'd gotten kind of what they were coming to this page to get and often left the site. We could see this through a couple different ways, somewhat through Google Analytics, as well as through heat maps. There are heat maps out there that show how far down the page someone scrolls. And we could see on average, it was often somewhere in the middle of those resources. So that led us to a few different conclusions. The big one being people actually wanted resources on this page. Unlike the previous page where they weren't engaging with the calculator, they were just going to get to products. Oftentimes, users weren't even getting to the additional products that were at the bottom of the page. They were coming to that page to get product information and resources. So the CAD drawings seemed to be a much better fit for this page. So what did we do? We added them to the tabs. And when you would click on this in the tabs, it would open a pre-filtered list of the CAD drawings for those products. So the cool thing with this is that, for one, we could see people are coming to this page looking for those resources. So we allowed them to very easily gain access to those resources in a way that they were already engaging with the page. We could see from the data they were interacting with the tabs. They knew to click on those tabs to get information. And so this was just another tab that we were adding onto the page and some additional information that they could gather where it was relevant. The other really great thing about this is it didn't increase the length of the page at all. We knew this was a long page. We knew we already were giving them lots of information that they needed to get access to. So let's not increase the length of that page any more than we have to. Let's just include that in a tab, get it into something that they can access without kind of complicating that process any further if they weren't looking for those CAD drawings here. So just an example of how this is a very minor change, just adding a little bit of content to that site, but we could use data and use some of that understanding of user experience. In this case, heat maps were very heavily used to really make sure that we are making the right recommendation for the best placement of that content. Now, heat maps are really helpful, but they're not the only thing that we can use. There's a lot of other tools, and oftentimes we recommend doing more than one different area of analysis when we're trying to learn about these kind of user experiences. But for this example, I want to talk about the organization of products on a website. And in this case, we're talking about improving the user experience and looking at different ways of organizing kind of complicated products for a manufacturer. In this case, it's a manufacturer of brazing alloys. So basically alloys that allow metals to join together. And they wanted to improve that user experience. They had some very complicated, very technical products, and they wanted to make sure that users could find them on their current site and were able to kind of filter through those pages effectively. Really, their big question that we were faced with was, how is their experience compared to a current competitor experience? And if we're looking at making changes to that experience for products, should we incorporate any of the things the competitor is doing, or should we just look at optimizing their current website? And part of the reason this came up is because the websites were incredibly different in how they treated very, very similar products. For option one, we can see that the primary way of filtering through products here is by filtering. Like I just said, filtering, clicking boxes and filtering, that they had different ways of clicking on different items that they could filter through, and it would shorten down the list of available products based on those filters that were selected. Or they could type in a search to refine that result. On the other site, there were no filters at all, just a table where a lot of these things were listed out instead of in cards, and a search bar, and that was it. So we wanted to better understand how are users interacting with these experiences when they're trying to do the same thing on these sites? And are there things that we can incorporate from either experience to make an optimal experience? Really, which is the easier one to use? So in this case, we couldn't run heat maps on the competitor website. We don't have access to that website. We did run heat maps on the site we had access to, but that's not really helpful if we're looking to compare it to a competitor. So in this case, we did something called user testing, which is a different way of gathering that type of data. What user testing is we use an outside tool. There's a ton of different tools that you can use, but we run users through different tests or tasks on a site, and we watch how they complete them. So for example, if we want to see how someone downloads a PDF, how they access a PDF on the site, we will, through this tool, this online tool, say, user who is talking to today, go to this website and download this PDF. And sometimes we give them more context, sometimes we give them less context, depending on what it is that we're testing. We then have a video recording that we can take of that user completing that task without our intervention. These are all recorded through an online tool that we are not moderating typically. So users are completing them on their own time, and then we watch the video after the fact. So we can see that pure interaction without us biasing it at all. And then we often can ask them questions, see how they complete the task, and learn from what they did on the site to, see what worked and what didn't, and how we can best improve that experience. So for this, we narrowed it down to a pretty specific audience. We wanted to make sure we were targeting 5 users, which was the industry standard for this. Typically, we recommend 5 to 10 users for an average website. The users we got were between 25 to 59 years old, just based on what the tool gathered. Most of them were male. That is pretty equivalent with the industry that they're targeting. And we had narrowed it down so that they were working in a field related to the target audience they were trying to reach with their products in general. In terms of tasks we asked them to complete, we wanted them basically to compare finding similar products. So we looked for products that had very similar classifications, maybe slightly different branding, but the basic product at the end of the day was the same. And we said, find this product on option 1, find this product on option 2, watched how it worked, and then asked them to compare that experience. And we did that with a couple different products and a couple different ways of talking about those products. For example, if you were searching by certain classifications, if you were searching by use case, if you were searching by industry, how do those things change and differ if you're going with that kind of mindset in mind to these websites? We again watched the videos, watched how users completed the tasks, and within those videos, we also asked them to talk about their experience, talk about which option they preferred in each use case, talk about where they got hung up, and we use that to understand how the sites functioned. So how this worked out was that 3 out of the 5 users preferred option 1, and they preferred the idea of kind of using those filters and how that site functioned, which was the site that we were originally starting with, and understanding how, to get to those products. We actually pulled this quote from one of them, which said that they prefer the website with the more functional filters, this one. The other one, you had to do it manually because they didn't have the option to actually click on filters. They preferred the way of selecting and filtering things down versus having to just search and scroll. Now, there were 2 users that felt a little differently. One did just prefer the other option because they don't like using filters. And the other one said that they were pretty equal because they just use search. And both sites had the option to search. And so as long as the search worked, they could do what they needed to do. So it was really interesting for us to watch how someone completed the same tasks on both sites with such different user experiences. And while we, learned that, some of them preferred this one, others preferred the other option, really the biggest takeaway for us looking at how they talked about that experience was that really the reason why option 1 came out the top is because it had variety, because you could do just the search or you could do the filters. Maybe we can make that search a little more prominent on the page so that users knew it was available, but it was, something that users could easily see that they could engage with in multiple different ways. And because preferences from these users who are interacting with the page changed, some of them liked filters, some of them liked search, some of them just liked to scroll down the page so they found what they were looking for. We needed to account for the different ways that somebody wanted to search, since there wasn't a consistent way that anybody was doing it. Nobody, it wasn't that we were going in and seeing that everyone was using filters and nobody was using search. It was pretty mixed. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a variety of options for users when they got to that page to filter down to those products. So we wanted to make sure they had multiple options in how they wanted to search and sort through those results. Another thing that was really interesting is we could learn from some of the struggles that they had on the various sites. So for example, on the option 2 site, there were a handful of users who didn't even see that there was a search available at all. That kind of search box, while it's there on the page, just didn't stand out to them. So for us, it was a good sign that, okay, let's make sure that the search is prominent and make sure we don't just kind of hide it off to the side, that it's something that users can easily find on the page and that it's kind of full width and takes precedence. The other thing that was fascinating with this one is that because it was in a table like this, users tried to click the headings to sort the table, like you would do kind of in Excel or a table with products you're looking at on a website in general. They thought that they could sort by the different headings, which doesn't work, at least not on this website. So it was a good signal to us that if we do end up putting something in a table like this, let's make sure that we can sort by those headings, because users were just intuitively trying to do that. Sometimes without even realizing it, we would see them click on those headings and we want, that wasn't working for them. So that was an unexpected experience for them and kind of slowing them down in the process of getting to those products. The other thing that was fascinating is that users, when you set up these tasks, aren't always going to engage in the way that you would expect them to. So in this example, we gave them the full website. We brought them right to the product page we wanted them to use and said, find this product in these different ways. But some users went to the general site search that was at the very top of the page in the utility navigation. They didn't go to the product search that was really prominent on the page that we showed before. They went right up to the general site search and did a search for the product there and analyze the results that way, which was not something that the team, when we were setting up these tasks, was expecting. But it makes complete sense if you think about how some people navigate a website. Sometimes you're going to get users who go right to the top navigation and click through the path until they get to where they're looking for. But there's just as many users who just go straight to site search, especially today in the kind of world of complicated websites that manufacturers have to deal with. Some people just don't want to dealing with navigation. They're going to go straight to search, the general site search, and just see what pops up. So this was a sign to us that, while we're focusing on these product pages, we got to think about this in a larger perspective of its overall impact on the site and make sure that the general site search was also up to par, because that also impacted the way users were finding products. The other thing that is true of almost any type of micro UX research that you do is that you're often going to find more than what you went looking for. So in this case, while they were completing these tasks, they provided feedback on lots of things that we didn't even ask them about. There was feedback on the way that the cards looked for the products. There was feedback on the general website navigation, something we didn't even ask them to touch. We asked them just to stay on the page they were on, but they made comments on, I would think I would have to go here in the navigation. Some of them clicked onto the product detail pages. Again, not something we asked them to do, but they were providing feedback on that. They talked about the design. They talked about page layout comments. This is something that we see all of the time. Even when we're doing heat maps, like in the previous example, we'll see clicks on things that we weren't expecting to see clicks on, which might lead us down another rabbit hole of, well, why is that happening? What is the general reason someone's doing that on the site? And why are they on this page in the first place if they're looking for that content? So the thing to keep in mind is that, by doing this little micro research, you might also identify other areas that could be optimized as well. The cool thing about this is that none of these are major problems. You're likely kind of going in because maybe you've got an issue with one area of the site and you're trying to fix that. But it might give you better insight to your overall website performance, as well as it might help you identify other areas that you might want to dig into in the future to better improve that experience. The other thing to keep in mind is that with any of this research, and I've kind of hinted to this throughout this process, you always want to validate it with other types of data. When we did heat maps in the first example, we were looking at Google Analytics as well. We were looking at some SEO data to see how users were searching before they got to that page, if they came in through organic search. Lots of different things we were looking at to better understand how users were getting to those pages in the first place and how that might interact that overall experience. Same thing with user research, actually, especially with user research. You always want to validate it with other types of data, other types of things, because no one source of UX data is going to tell the full story. The best way to get the full and complete picture of what's going on your site is to look at it from multiple perspectives and see if they all align. It's something that we did with all of these, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, because definitely want to make sure that you're validating that you've got the correct understanding. I hope this webinar gave you some ideas of how some minor changes can actually make a pretty major impact, both in SEO and on the website side of things. So hopefully you get some ideas of how you can make some micro changes that actually matter. And really, our big thing with this is that not every change needs to be a major one. You can make small updates to your SEO or small updates to your website that can make pretty major impacts towards the goals that you want to be accomplishing. You need to always be a massive revamp to get the results that you need. It's also a much less time-consuming and often more cost-efficient way of doing things. Again, if you've got major issues that it's going to be cheaper just to start fresh, well, that's one thing. But in a lot of cases, making little changes can help you make your website stay fresh longer and help keep you up to date on the SEO and GEO side as well. It also is sometimes easier to sell to leadership. So if you go in saying you need a whole brand new website, well, that's one thing, versus if you go in saying, hey, we need a little bit of time and budget to focus on this one area of the website to make sure it's performing at its absolute best. That can sometimes be a little bit easier to sell to your leadership team as well. So start with the goal in mind, decide what it is that you want to achieve, both on the website and the SEO side, and help build a plan to make sure, whether it's a micro change or a major change, that you can accomplish it and make sure that your marketing and website are performing the best that they can. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Ed. Appreciate the insight on those micro moments. We did get a couple of questions ahead of time and a few during the webinar, so let me ask those. I'm just kind of collating them right now. So the first one we got here today during the webinar, and there's a follow-up that is related. So let me put this out here. I think, Ed, I'm going to have you take the first part of this. How do we do keyword research if there was no tracking on the website?
Yeah, so for keyword research, you don't need tracking on your website. You're going to go out and utilize tools like SEMrush. I can look at any website on that tool, and there's a variety of them. You could use Moz.com. You put in the domain, it's going to give you keywords that other domains rank for, or you start searching keywords on there, and it's going to give you keyword data on how often something's searched, what type of search. Is it informational? Is it a purchase-based search? And it'll give you related keywords. So then you can start developing a list from there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And this was a follow-up from the same attendee. What if there is no data analytics available? How do you identify what would be effective on the website? And Caitlin, I'm going to toss that to you.
Yeah, I would say, well, depending on how your site was built, Google Analytics is free. So get some Google Analytics running on there. Even a month's worth of data is a good place to start. Same thing with most heat map tools. We usually recommend either Microsoft Clarity or Hotjar, or also have free versions to use. So I think just get started. A month's worth of data obviously doesn't show the full picture, but it's going to get you a pretty good start to understanding how things are going. So my biggest thing would be get running. And if your site for some reason can't handle that, getting that kind of data, well, that's a sign. That's one of those major technology things. That's time we got to move. We can't paint the room to make it work. We got to find a new house, and it might be time for a redesign.
So as a short-term approach, Caitlin, while you're installing that and letting it run, would you recommend maybe going ahead and talking to a couple of users to find out what may be dissonant, and that would give you some insight, at least from the empirical data side too?
Yeah, you can definitely. I think it's always a good idea if you could talk to some users, whether internal or external. Say, what are your thoughts on the website? Try to hopefully talk to people who will be as impartial as possible. Get a third party to talk to them because usually they'll tell us everything. Just get started with whatever data you can gather. Really, I would say if you don't have data, just get started gathering data and go from there.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, if you don't have data, especially if you don't have GA4, that should be one of your priorities, is to get that
Yeah.
up and running.
Yeah, good advice. Thanks, guys. Like I said, we did receive a few questions ahead of time. Most of the questions were about WordPress. So for those of you who submitted those questions, we're going to go ahead and have our team reach out to you directly. I'm going to kind of focus on the questions that we had that were on the topics that we discussed this morning, but we're not going to forget about you. So we'll reach out to you on those WordPress questions. I had another interesting one here. Can I train AI to recommend my company to people looking for what my company does and the services we provide?
So what you can do is write really good content based on how you want to write quality content that is set up in a way for AI to utilize your content and then shoot it out. So step one is actually write the content. Step two is actually you need to rank organically on something like Google because that's how you get into the AI. So when you talk about training it, it's going to basically use the content on your site once it finds it on Google and then put it into its tool. And when I go on the tool and I type in, oh, what is digital marketing, then it might pull your information in and serve it up to someone and serve a link back to your site. So it's really about having quality content on your site that is answering the questions people might be asking. One example I used during the webinar is someone changing oil on a vehicle. I was referring to a specific blog I know about that is driving AI traffic because it has the content that someone's using AI for, right? Like they need to know how to do that. They're going by a step-by-step thing. And that blog post is actually feeding the AI and ultimately training it.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate that. Here's another one that came through the chat that is AI related. There is a lot of noise out there around Google no longer being relevant. People are turning more and more to ChatGPT. Is Google losing relevance and market share?
No. Google, well, what I'll say is Google is highly, highly relevant. It is a clickbait thing to say it's dying or it's no longer relevant. We were talking about it on a podcast yesterday. My colleague brought up he's heard that since 2014 was the first time he heard that. And here we are, and Google's still doing really well, ultimately growing. I think what you're going to see is think of the AI as a shift in how things are using. And there's a couple sides of this. One, Google's testing out an AI search itself, and that could become more what their search looks like long term. Two, as we are like finding out more and more, again, this is new and is going to change, seems to be more of that awareness phase, maybe consideration of that overall digital funnel, and your website's going to be might end up, or SEO might end up being more that consideration sale bottom of the funnel. Because think of the example again, people are asking about how do I change the oil on this, or how do I do this? That's how they find out about you. That's how they found out about you on Google, and they were doing research beforehand. They still need to come to your site for things. Ultimately, I think there's always going to be a place for both.
Excellent. And real quick, there's a follow-up. I'm not sure that we can answer this question. If we ask AI a patented-oriented question, is that information now out there? Well, I would say that I mean, if it's anywhere that can be crawled or indexed or found online that is not protected by some kind of really good encryption, AI is going to eventually find it. And that's one of the things that has really accelerated in the last 3 months is that, 2.5 years ago when ChatGPT was first introduced, it was very rudimentary. It had a lot of what they call hallucinations because it was still kind of learning, right? Now it's gotten to the point where it's finding everything. And if you use it a lot, you'll notice that it cites its sources. It can tell you where it got the information. You can ask it follow-up prompts to dig deeper. So if it's out there and it's available some way, AI is going to find it. So I don't know what patent stuff you're talking about specifically. If it's publicly available and can be crawled, it's going to be found.
Yeah, especially if it can be crawled, they're going to crawl it and they're going to find it. If you ask it a question, I wouldn't worry as much about that, but it's still going to take that information, so it is going to be out there in a sense. So there's caution to be had with these AI tools for sure.
Right, right. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have, and unfortunately, we are up against a time limit here. If you have additional questions, please feel free to submit them to us. Before we wrap things up, though, we'd like to let you know that everyone attending this morning who has a valid business email address has been entered into a drawing for a free mini UX or mini SEO audit. The winner will be notified by email within 1 week after the webinar this morning. Also, please join us on Thursday, June 12th, speaking of AI, as we present AI secrets to building websites that captivate and convert. As always, all of our webinars are complimentary and begin at 10 a.m. Central Time, and you can learn more and register at learn@northwoods.com. And if you're looking for information on a specific topic or just want to stay up to date on the latest trends and developments in the constantly changing world of digital, you can check out our blog, our recorded webinars, our YouTube channel, and we have a brand new vodcast that we recently launched called Around the Campfire, featuring casual conversations with our experts on all things digital. We encourage you to check that out. And lastly, if you'd like to learn more about Northwoods and the many services we offer, from website design and development to custom software and digital marketing to digital advertising and marketing strategy, visit us at nwsdigital.com to explore our services details, read our client stories, and much more. And after the webinar window closes, there's a short survey that will be available. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could share your feedback on how we did this morning. So that concludes our webinar this morning. I'd like to thank Ed and Caitlin and each of you for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. And until then, have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you very much.